I'm Alice Vale.
And I'm Monsignor Charles Minor. Although the divorce rate is increasing across the country, there are many couples happily married celebrating 25, 30, 50, and more years of marriage. Tonight, we're going to meet two such couples.
We'll also take you to Mr. Rogers' neighborhood and meet the star of the PBS series, Fred McPhilly Rogers. Our short segments include a look at a visit to Philadelphia by Father George Clements, the Chicago priest who has an adopted son, and a profile of peace activist Molly Rush.
The popular numbers are that from 1/3 to 1/2 of all the marriages in this country end up in separation or divorce. We thought we'd like to take a look at marriage through the eyes of some experts, from people who have years of experience in the field behind them.
Promise me your tomorrow.
Promise me your tomorrow.
Smile for me with your
Smile for me.
We can find our dreams together and build our lives on love.
Few things rank with marriage as a threshold experience by which we mark our lives, though the present state of marriage as an institution causes us to wonder, is the commitment too deep? Monsignor James McGrath is the officialis of the Metropolitan Tribunal of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. One of the functions of his office is to grant annulments.
Marriages break up because the parties are unable to complement each other. That's spelled with an E, not an I. That is to fill out the personality of each other and come to a fruition in what marriage is. It's a society of two persons, a community of life of two persons. This community at times does not develop for any of these reasons about which I have mentioned. It could be, for example, that it didn't develop because the husband drank too much or because the wife spent too much money. But the real reason is that they didn't come to a community of living.
Each year, the Archdiocese recognizes the gift of marriage with anniversary masses at which couples married 25 years or more renew their vows.
I reaffirm my marriage vows and rededicate myself in the same spirit that the Messiah would suffer. Therefore, reform your lives. Turn to God.
Bill and Mary Ann Boylan of Wallingford, celebrating 25 years together, were readers at one of the masses this year.
Mary Ann and I didn't just get married that day, 25 years ago. We became a sacrament.
Bill is the greatest gift I'll ever be given in my life. And God's counting on me to not shortchange that gift. And I really believe that when Bill and God and I work as a team, there's nothing that the three of us cannot handle.
Starting out kind of naive, kind of young, not knowing really what to expect. Getting a few knocks and bumps along the way.
How you doing?
Growing to realize how important we were to each other. And growing, I think, closer today than we were then. But with the realization is that we really couldn't settle in. And there's 25 years of endurance.
I think the way that I have to do that growing every day is to realize that my main thrust of energy has to be put into our relationship. But I want to really work at being Bill's best friend, one day at a time.
think as the children became teenagers, I don't know if we were abnormal or normal or whatever you want to call it as a parents, but we do our share of worrying. I think our kids are good kids, but I think that what they're exposed to just really frightens me very much. It still does. And I don't know that I'll probably get over those kind of downs until they're all settled and married and have children of their own someplace. And I'll be worrying as a grandparent.
For us, the secret's been that, yeah, life probably always will be like a roller coaster ride. You know, you get up and then you hit the pits. But the trick is to stay in that same seat together, because that makes the highs better and it makes the low spots tolerable. And there's something really neat about laughing in the same man's arms that you weep with, you know, and that you love with. And so it's good. As we look back over 25 years, we've laughed more than we've cried.
I came over in 29 in June. In October there was the crash, the stock market.
Fred and Maria Schmidt came to the United States from Germany in the 1920s. They met in Philadelphia, and though the future seemed bleak for many people at that time, they married and eventually settled in Elkins Park. That was 50 years ago.
32, you couldn't get a job for no money. You did everything that we could do to make a dollar. My wife used to sew and go out and serve luncheons and dinners yet after we were married. And it was tough.
But through hard work and love, they endured and attained their milestone of half a century together, which gave Mrs. Schmidt an opportunity to reflect.
The people fall in love, well, there is, there's physical attraction, which I didn't believe very much on. And then there is other emotional, the real attraction, the real love. And I really think that we did have, I'm sure, we had the real love for each other, and we wanted to do the right thing when we got married.
In every marriage there are ups and downs. And you don't just throw the towel in after the first argument, you know, or the first disappointment, whatever you call it, or the first sickness. You have to endure it. You got to stick together and get over that bump. And we find out it works out all right, but with the help of God, always with the help of God. You got to stay close to God. If they would get divorced, you know, they don't feel like sticking it out, they would maybe marry somebody else and then find out it's the same thing anyway.
We're still trying. And we can't make so many mistakes anymore. So we should, you know, get there. You know, that last hump, and I think we're gonna make it. Made it so far. With the help of God, yes.
Sure. Really should sing, when your hair has turned to silver, I will love you just the same. I will always call you sweetheart. That will always be your name. To a garden filled with roses, down the sunset trail will stray. When your hair has turned to silver, I will love you just the same. And it has turned to silver now. But I love you just the same anyway.
For those married couples who fret about the advancing age in their lives, there's a lesson to be learned from the song that Fred Schmidt sings to his wife Maria. And that is that the color of the hair is not as important as watching the change together.
Like many Americans, Molly Rush is concerned about the nuclear arms race. However, on September 9th, 1980, she and 7 others took matters into their own hands. They damaged 2 nuclear missiles in a witness at the General Electric plant in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. The group, known as the Plowshares 8, was arrested and tried on charges of burglary, conspiracy, and criminal mischief. They were convicted on all counts. Molly's 2 to 5 year sentence is currently under appeal. But for this wife and mother of 6, the threat of nuclear war cannot be ignored. Molly, the way you describe it was more like a religious event than a social protest.
Well, I think we tried to make very clear in the statement that we prepared before we went into GE that what we were doing was trying to obey the injunction to beat swords into plowshares, the Isaiah and Micah injunctions that call on us to live out that role of peacemaker.
Had you ever done anything like this before?
I had participated in a few civil disobedience actions that were basically symbolic. I think this was clearly a symbolic action. It was limited in scope, and it was, while we certainly did damage to 2 warheads, we very carefully limited what we were doing.
Molly, you're a wife, the mother of 6 kids. How did your family respond to all of this?
I think it's really remarkable that every single one of my children, though, have an understanding that this was an act of conscience, that it was done on their behalf, on behalf of all the children, and probably we're one of the families that talks openly about nuclear weapons in a way that very few families do.
Molly, what about people who think the same way about the nuclear war issue? Do you recommend the same kind of action?
I think there are as many responses as there are people. I think the basic issue for all of us, and it continues to be a struggle in my own life, is to open oneself up to, first, the reality of nuclear weapons, a confrontation with that reality in our own lives, and then a willingness to listen to what the Spirit calls us to do.
He is the pastor of Holy Angels Church on the south side of Chicago, and he caused a bit of controversy last year when, in a desire to set an example, he adopted a homeless boy. Now he spends some of his time traveling the country promoting adoptions of homeless and institutionalized black children, and he was in Philadelphia recently to address a group of adoption officials.
I introduce to you now Father George Clements. Thank you.
He is Father George Clements, and his message, aimed particularly at the black community, was strong.
There are 100,000 of these children simply because not enough black people have become aware of the dimensions of the problem. The key word in all of this is going to be awareness. It's up to us. And it's high time that somebody came out and spoke the truth. Pull the covers off and stop going around blaming anybody and everybody for our problems but ourselves. And I get these
The program through which Father Clements challenges people to deal with this issue is called One Church, One Child.
The program is moving along at a very fast clip, and every community that I've been in, I've been very heartened by the fact that it's received such generous support. I feel that the program is so simple that it can very easily take root. What it drives home is that every church in the black community would be encouraged to challenge their congregation that at least one family in that congregation would adopt a child. And once that happens, the church gets on the One Church, One Child list. Now, I might add that...
And how is his son, Joey?
We went through some pretty rough periods, but now we seem to be on a plateau, and I'm reasonably satisfied with the progress that's happening in our relationship. The majority of his friends have learned to just accept the fact, and they don't really treat him any differently than they would treat any other youngster.
And I get these critics that come to me all the time, and they say, well, why don't you talk about these teenage girls having these babies? Why don't you talk about abortion and Planned Parenthood and all that? I'm not sophisticated enough to deal with all that. I'm dealing with the end product that's here right now, living, breathing human beings.
Fred McFeely Rogers is a 29-year television veteran with an extensive background in music composition, psychology, and child development. He's also a Presbyterian minister, but he's best known as Mr. Rogers from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, the PBS series that's carried nationwide by more than 250 stations. Well, we went behind the scenes at WQED in Pittsburgh to see all the work that's going on in preparation for the season premiere.
Stand by to cue Fred. Cue Fred. Well, now, okay, camera one, that's a full zoom out, camera one, as you say, well.
It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? It's a neighborly day in this beauty wood, a neighborly day for a beauty. Would you be mine? Could you be mine?
Fred McFeely Rogers is Mr. Rogers, host of the longest-running children's program on public television, and friend and minister to 2 generations of children and parents.
Let's make the most of this beautiful day. Since we're together, we might as well say, would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor? Won't you please? Won't you please? Please won't you be my neighbor? Hello, neighbor. Feel like playing peekaboo today. Do you ever do that?
Well, yeah, I feel personally about the things that we deal with on the neighborhood. Unless I'm ready to deal with a subject, I don't tackle it. It was years before I wanted to do the program about the death of a goldfish. I just wasn't ready. And I think the children could sense whether I was going to be feeling uncomfortable with something, and so I just didn't want to do it.
It is this sensitivity and awareness that has made Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood an award-winning and well-respected television program. There are many things that are stressed in the half-hour show: feelings about love, fear, sadness, anger, friendship, and trust.
I think that the neighborhood tries to encourage children to play in as creative ways as possible, because play is children's work, and we feel good when we can work. All of us do. Don't you feel good at your work?
Mr. Rogers must feel good because he works very hard. He's the president of Family Communications, which not only produces the neighborhood, but also a wide variety of audiovisual materials. They provide a series of audio, video, and print materials designed for children with disabilities. and another series for families that are going through a particular stress, like going to the hospital for the first operation. Mr. Rogers' main concern is for children, their families, and human growth.
Every time I make a program, I pray that some word that is heard may be thine. Because if it isn't worth anything anyway. You know, it's just a lot of wind. I don't want to be in a pulpit. You know, I don't want to wear a long black robe and preach. We'll work something out. So, old Pittsburgh Presbytery came up with the idea of ordaining me to work with families through the mass media.
Mr. Rogers takes his ministry a step further, like going to hospitals to visit children, in this case, the Alfred DuPont Institute in Wilmington, Delaware.
All the kids here are waiting to see Mr. Rogers because it's Children in Hospitals Week.
Oh, good. Oh, you use our tapes, do you?
Yes, we do. We use them in the clinic. I do a parent education program.
I'm going to present a poster and a pin to him this afternoon.
Oh, my goodness. Many children wonder if and when they'll go home when they're in a hospital. Most kids are very concerned about their families and being abandoned. You know, the very best hospital in the world is second best to being well.
This is Rodney.
Hi, Rodney.
Hi, Mr. Rogers.
I'm so glad to meet you.
Me too.
Somebody said that you had something that you wanted to give me.
Yes. On behalf of all the patients, I'd like to present to you this poster and this pin.
Oh, thank you very much. Could you help me put that on? It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? And I felt today, when we were with the children here in the hospital, that that really, truly was an extension of my own family. It's a wonderful it's a wonderful thing to feel that people can use the work that you've done. And we work hard. Well, we're real neighbors today, not just television.
Besides his media ministry, Mr. Rogers has disciplined himself to exercise every day.
I try to swim at least 15 or 20 minutes every day, just as hard as I can. And I've been doing that now for 12 years. I used to swim when I was a kid, but not as regularly as I do now. And I feel better.
Besides swimming, Mr. Rogers exercises his mind by writing all the words and melodies for his neighborhood show. His degree in music composition from Rollins College in Florida comes in handy when he writes operas for his show and when he puts on a performance, as in this case with the Delaware Symphony.
Yes, we do. We love If somebody had told me to tell them where I was headed to, 30 years ago when I was in New York, I would have never in a million years have dreamed that you and I'd be talking about the neighborhood today. I mean, it truly is a mystery. And to be able to be present to the moment is the greatest gift of grace. Tree, 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 tree.
Although countless honors and awards have been bestowed on Mr. Rogers, even an honorary doctorate from Yale University, he remains an extraordinarily modest man. Some people even find it hard to believe that he is such a genuinely gentle man. But all any cynic has to do to be won over is to observe the interaction between a child and Mr. Rogers. And they find themselves becoming a Mr. Rogers neighbor, too.
Tree, tree, tree. Tree, tree, tree. Thank you very much. Tree, tree, tree.
Next week, we'll learn about The Place, a center that provides emergency funds, health facilities, and education for the poor in the area. Our short segments include the Song of St. Francis, performed by John Michael Talbot, and People and Places introduces us to Father Francis, official greeter at a Georgia monastery.
Well, Alice, before we get on to all next week's business, we better take care of this week's very special business.
Absolutely. It's Father's Day. And to all the dads in the audience, and especially to my dad, happy Father's Day.
We certainly want to thank all of you fathers for the great work you do. Their love for us, always in the spirit of St. Joseph. God bless you.
Thanks for being with us. We'll see you again next week.
Goodbye, and God bless you.